first of all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for giving up your time this evening to join us on this discussion. It's really going to be interesting, and I hope it's going to give you guys more confidence and ideas as you're supporting your child or the child that you look after who's moving on from year 6 to year 7. So just to let you know a little bit about myself and my colleagues that are here today, I'm Ruth and I coordinate the mentoring project here at Look UK. Now, Look's quite a small charity that support VI children, young people and their families, and we do a range of projects that are all aimed at supporting young people to really thrive, connect and learn from other people's experiences. We're a small team, as I said, so there's 7 of us in that team, with a few of the team members also part-time. So I feel just really proud to be part of Look, especially at the moment. So I feel like we're putting a lot of things together and really putting together as a team as well. So it's a really fun place to work. The peer mentoring service that we provide is delivered with the support and all the volunteering commitments and endeavours of nearly 70 trained VI peer mentors on the project. And we've got 4 of our peer mentors here tonight. So we've got 2 of them that volunteer for us, and also Ellen and Chris are also trained peer mentors within the Look team, and that's how they first got involved with Look before then starting to work for Look as well. And the peer mentoring project was run online already pre the lockdown environment. So we're really grateful to be in a situation that we can grow and develop that project further during lockdown, because we were already kind of working in a remote fashion on that project. So we've added more events, because before the coronavirus struck, we were planning on a lot of face-to-face events and workshops before the coronavirus. So we had a range of things like a lovely summer festival, time at a farm, working with mentors to develop young people's confidence in who they are really, and as well as schools workshops. So we're now running a lot of online events that are support groups, wellbeing workshops, and creating some more podcasts that around different topics that will be helpful and informative to the VI community. And that's really what our heart is. We were established by parents of VI children and young people for parents of VI children and young people. And that's continued to be why we work and how we work. And our mentors, who are really involved in doing the one-to-one mentoring, have also transferred their energy and passion from a lot of their online partnerships to also other events and workshops within Look. They do that both face-to-face and now online as well. So within our staff team, Ellen and Chris, who are both here tonight, and Charlotte, our director, all have severe sight impairments. And so that's really helps us remain being user-led at the heart of what we do, because we're always thinking about how it feels to use the things that we do and to be a part of the things that we do, because we're constantly testing and moulding things based on the needs of the young people that we support. So we've got a fantastic panel of experts who I'm going to introduce to you shortly for tonight's event. And they're going to be able to respond to your questions and share advice and information to help you and your child in their moving on journey. Now, this is such a strange situation. I know that typically you would have questions about this year 6 to year 7 time without coronavirus, but now we're still in lockdown. I tried to, as we were at the start of this event, I was thinking, how many weeks is it? And I can't quite remember how many weeks we've now been in lockdown. And I know there's a huge amount of uncertainty still. Just as for myself as a parent, I know my children's school can't really confirm what's going to happen next week until after Thursday. So I'm guessing you guys are probably all in the same situation. And how are we going to prepare for things with such short notice? And on top of the questions about whether your year 6 pupils can return to their school and lessons to complete their primary school journey, they're going to be wondering about how their new school is going to feel. Now, the process of homeschooling, being away from their friends, from their routines, and having all these questions, it's just put so much pressure on everyone at home, and we're really aware of that pressure. So we really hope tonight's event is going to be supportive of you to explore that. The key messages we've heard from the parents, from the mentors, and from young people that we've spoken to is the thing that they would have really valued in their own transition, in their own journey from year 6 to year 7, was to have time to share with people with experience, to help them prepare even further. So even though our panel haven't been in this situation before, that we're all facing an unknown, we do know that that what they did find at secondary school will hopefully be relevant to you and your children in your own journey. So we're aiming to cover quite a few topics tonight, especially communicating with your child's new school about their VI needs, your child's individual hopes and the situation that they're in, helping to prepare for the emotional, the social and the physical challenges and changes that face them in high school, and how to support your child both at home and in the school with their friendships and with the worries that both you and your child have about the whole new environment, but also to help them achieve their full potential. I know it's filled with worry, but also finding ways that they're going to enjoy this experience. So I think just the coming together is going to be so hugely supportive tonight. So thank you so much. And I'm sure along the way we'll share lots and lots of information. There will be a support pack that we will send out post the session as well, with more resources for you all. And do feel free after the event to stay on and chat, and we can give you help to, if you've got very particular questions that you want to ask, we can also make sure that you can work with somebody that can help you develop answers for that. So I'm going to hand over to Ellen now, who's going to run through how the event's going to work and how we're going to use our mics and things tonight.
Thanks, Ruth. As Ruth said, I'm Ellen. I'm the events coordinator at Look. I'm the one who's been sending you all the emails. Sorry. So thank you all for joining. We have the chat feature here on Zoom, which you can use to chat with the whole group and also to send messages. So please do feel free to use that chat feature to add comments, submit comments or questions in the chat to the group, or if you feel more comfortable, you can also private message any comments or questions to myself or Emma, who is my support worker and supporting me to run this event tonight. Finally, as well, just to add, so at one point we'll start off with some questions that Ruth will direct to the panel, and then a bit later on in the session we will open up to you guys, so we'll give you the opportunity to ask your questions as well. So it'll be really helpful for us when you're asking a question for you to just let us know your name, who you are, and just a little bit about yourself and your child, just so we've got a bit more context for who you are so we can answer your question. And I think that's everything from me. As Ruth said, we'll be sending out the notes and any resources to you all after the session as well. So yeah, I hope you all enjoy.
Thanks, Ellen. Before I go on to what the government's outlined so far, I'm just going to let our panel introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask our panel to tell us their name, where they work or volunteer, and whether or not they're visually impaired. So, or if they are a parent, just tell us that they're a parent of a VI child and a little about their child. Okay, so I'm just going to run through over to the panel. So Andrea, could I come over to you now, Andrea?
My name's Andrea. I don't have a visual impairment, but I'm the Special Educational Needs Coordinator, or SENCO, at Pedmore High School, which is a secondary school, smaller than average secondary school. So I'm responsible for coordinating all special educational needs. But we are currently in our local area the mainstream school with the highest number of VI students in our school. We are mainstream. We don't have a specialist unit, but we do have a fantastic team of teaching assistants, and particularly I'd say our liaisons with the local education authority or the VI team. So yeah, that's secondary that is in sort of my domain. Although that I have started to now work on some of our transitions from primary, so year sixes coming into year 7. So hopefully I can offer some advice or answer some questions if we have any.
Well, thank you, Andrea. Rabina, could I come over to you, please?
Hi, I'm Rabina Stone, and I don't have visual impairments. I'm a qualified teacher of visual impairments at Manchester Sensory Support Service, and I've been there for the last 8 years or so. So I support children who either live in Manchester and or attend Manchester educational settings. So my role's split up into working with the children and young people and the families, with staff in educational settings, and with other professionals, for example, educational psychologists, occupational therapists, medical professionals. I work with children and young people from 0 to 19 in the homes, in earlier settings, primary, secondary, further education. at the moment, we don't work with anybody in higher education. So we provide educational provision, developmental support, we do capacity building in schools, sharing best practice, carry out assessments of children's needs, through observation, ongoing assessment. We teach children, family settings how to use assistive technology, and we also teach pupils how to visually access the curriculum, perhaps teaching Braille, how to use equipment, software.
Thanks. That's great. Thanks, Robina. There's so much to it. And I know that's probably just a really brief synopsis, but we can, if you want to add in more detail, there'll be a little bit of time later on after these intros as well. And then we've got Sam Campion over within the Guide Dogs education team. Could I come over to you, Sam?
Yep. Hello, my name's Sam Campion. I'm one of the specialist education support officers working with Guide Dogs Children and Young People's Services. So we have a small team of QTVIs, qualified teachers of visually impaired children, who work sort of to provide impartial, free advice for any families who aren't quite sure with anything regarding education, whether it be transition EHCPs, just questions about support levels or anything that they're not sure where else to go. We can point them in the right direction.
Fiona, could I come over to you, please?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
We live in North Lincolnshire. I'm a parent of a son in year 7 and daughter in year 9. My daughter is severely visually impaired. That happened suddenly. So she was fully sighted from birth, but then when she was 9, she suddenly became severely visually impaired. It's a genetic rare condition. She's the only visually impaired child in the school. It's a mainstream school. And she was the only one from her primary to go to this secondary school. So an extra challenge there. So hopefully I can give some helpful advice this evening.
Oh, definitely. Thank you, Fiona. Kathy, as well as another parent on the panel tonight as well. Kathy, can I come over to you?
Yes, so again, I'm a parent. I've got 2 visually impaired children, Will, who's 15, and 2 is in year 10. So he's first year of GCSEs, but hopefully in September, second year. And Emily, who's 19 at York University doing an English degree. But again, both those children, so it's labelled cone rod dystrophy, so under that heading retinitis pigmentosa. And again, like Fiona, we had no idea until Emily was about 10, and then a few things started to make sense. And I've had lots of positive dealings with different Senkos, different QTVIs as well, and just fighting all the time for educational healthcare plans. Both of them have gone to mainstream schools throughout. Hasn't been without its struggles, and certain university, which is for another day. But hopefully, like Fiona, I can provide some good information for you too as parents, because it is challenging, definitely.
Thank you, Kathy. We've got 2 of the Look mentors as well. I'll come over to them, and then we've also got a couple of other people that are going to be giving their input and advice tonight as well. But I'll go over to Lorna and then Ellie.
Hi, I'm Lorna. As we've said, I'm one of the Look mentors. So I'm visually impaired myself. I was basically born with it. I went through mainstream schools, including 2 secondary schools, the first of which I was pretty much the only disabled person there, and the second of which was a mainstream with a VI unit. So they were 2 very, very different experiences. And I now work for, as well as my volunteering for Look, I have a day job at a local charity. I'm based down in Brighton, and I teach other visually impaired, mostly children, how to use assistive technology, and I'm also a life coach and mentor. So sort of aside from my own experience as it was, I'm still working alongside some visually impaired children who are going from primary to secondary and through secondary as well.
Thanks,
so
Lorna.
hopefully I can add something helpful.
Definitely. And then we've got another mentor here tonight as well. Ellie.
I'm Ellie. I'm a Look mentor. I also work as a professional actor, and that's part-time. I went to a secondary school with a VI unit, and I was the only person from my primary school that went to that school. Luckily, there were other VI children there, and I had a good support system. Obviously, it didn't come without its challenges. And now I am going into my second year at Leeds University, and I'm studying English.
Thanks, Ellie. That's great. And then we've got one more parent as well, Jane.
My daughter, had done a term and a bit of secondary school. She's severely sight impaired, also has a hearing impairment. So lots of really support from advisory teachers. I'd say some of my transition was exceptional.
Thank you, Jane. So it just went a little bit at the end, but I know Jane is really happy to share with you, especially for parents who've potentially got children with other needs as well as VI needs, some of her ideas and experiences that she's been through over the last couple of years, supporting her daughter in her own moving on from primary to secondary and getting all the right support networks in place, and the communication side of things as well. She'll have lots to share on that. Chris, is that okay to give just a little hello?
I'm Chris. I'm now part of the Look mentoring team, so I assist Ruth with all of the mentoring projects that we run. I'm visually impaired myself with retinitis pigmentosa. I was diagnosed when I was 8, so when I moved on from primary to secondary school, my sight was getting worse, and I went through mainstream education all of my life, and then went to university, and now I'm working for Look.
Thanks, Chris. That's great. We've also got Angela from HabVI UK.
I'm Angela Wood. So I'm here representing Habilitation VI UK, and I'm also a qualified habilitation specialist, and I work in the Dorset Local Authority, and we cover the area of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, as well as Dorset.
Before we go into the questions for tonight, we've done a little research about trying to gain some more clarity about what's happening in terms of the government's advice. I expect you're probably all aware of the fact that the next announcement will be due on the 28th of May. So they are hoping that schools will be able to reopen, and it sounds the government's spiel is also they're very convinced that they will reopen on the 1st of June, as long as they've got 5 conditions that need to be met. The guidance for schools around social distancing sets out a range of measures to protect children and staff, including reducing the size of classes and keeping children in small groups without mixing with others. So they would stay, so say if your child's in year 6, they would stay with their year 6 group. They're not going to intermingle with the reception class or with the year 1s that are also potentially going to be back on the 1st. That they will also have staggered break and lunch times, as well as staggered drop-off and pick-up times. The school are going to have increased frequency of cleaning and reducing the use of shared items and utilising their outdoor space. It's quite, again, vague about what's happening in terms of those children with child and need plans. Some children will be back in school, and some it will be they won't be back in school. So, but the government's official advice is they are encouraging attendance following a risk assessment carried out by the schools and parents. Obviously, not everyone's going to feel that the best option is to return. And then in terms of how the professionals working in the sector are going to get further advice about supporting VI children while social distancing. I know HabVI UK will have information based on the HAB teams that they support and network with. Also View, which is the professional umbrella organisation for QTVIs and professionals working with VIPs. And they're working with RNOB. They're going to have some guidance for how out their work while social distancing. And obviously they have said that one definitive piece of guidance for all settings is just not realistic. So what they are instead planning to do is to create a page online where they can make available all the guidance that schools and services have shared with them, with a covering set of questions to help people decide how to go about creating their own plans. And they're going to have that resource available within roughly the next week. Angela can share some more information from the HAB side of things.
Habilitation VI UK is a member organisation which provides professional support for habilitation specialists around the UK. So we organise regional and national training events, and we provide a network of resources for rehabilitation specialists, which includes our website. We have a members area within the website which hosts a huge amount of curriculum resources, which members utilise, for their everyday sort of work. On the front page of our website, we also do provide information and advice to parents and carers. So we have links as well to organisations such as Look, to just kind of, signpost parents as well. So what is habilitation training, and why is it so important for your child? Fundamentally, it's the one-to-one training that aims to develop your child's personal mobility skills, their orientation or navigation skills, and their everyday independent living skills, which all form part of the extended curriculum. And their overriding goal really is to maximise your child's ability to do things for themselves, and this could be dressing skills, personal care, eating, safe travel, shopping, having access to leisure activities. And developing these daily living skills is one of the most important things children can do. Learning to care for themselves, learning self-advocacy, resilience, problem-solving skills. And we teach all these things through very specific learning and experiential approaches. And with their independence comes greater opportunities for employment, and sort of greater social and emotional adjustment, really, to become active members of their community. So we would really always advocate that you ensure that your child has access to a qualified habilitation specialist, because we want to work with you. We want to work to ensure that we're there with you throughout your child's development and your educational journey with them. Where to find us at www.habilitationviuk.org.uk.
I know Rabina, our QTVI from Manchester, has given a great intro to what her role covers. Andrea and Sam, is there anything else, before we move on to the questions from the professional side of things, anything else in your role that you want to add that you didn't have time before?
I think just very briefly, just picking up a little bit about what Angela just said there about the habilitation side. So I've worked quite a lot with our habilitation team in our local area, and that was something that sort of I picked up that you said about the social and emotional aspect, and that was something that I think without our young, the young lad who's year 11, or just about to be year 11, that was a huge difference in his own self-esteem and his own ability to navigate the world outside of school, and I think that very much depends on parents' points of view as well, and in this case parents are quite protective and sort of wanting to do everything for their child in a very positive sort of way. But I think as he sort of grew up and became older and more independent, the habilitation side, and as a Senko working with the habilitation staff as well, to encourage that and to on occasion take time out of the young person's timetable to allow for more of that habilitation and going to the local shopping centre and on the bus and white cane training, and that's all very individual to the child's needs. But that was probably one of the biggest differences I saw from year 9 to year 11 in this young person was their independence and their want to go and do things a little bit more for themselves.
Thank you, Andrea. That's really helpful. And Sam, was there anything else before we move on to the questions? Is there anything else, any more detail you want to give to your role at Guide Dogs?
I think it's often the case that because of the name Guide Dogs, people don't always understand that there's a children and young people service that actually we support families of children from 0 to 25 And most of the services within that children and young people service have nothing to do with the dogs at all. We do have the buddy dog, and some young people obviously go on to have guide dogs, but we have, as well as our education service, which I've spoken about. So if you're not sure about any areas of education, you can come to us for support. We also have a family support service, so if there are any questions you want about other aspects of your life, whether you want signposting to other services, organisations, emotional support, that kind of thing, we have our access technology service who can offer advice on equipment, and again, that's all sort of free and impartial. We also have a grants service where you can apply for technology or sensory equipment for use in the home. We don't provide it for schools, but you can have it for personal use. And we have our normally family events, but obviously they're on hold at the moment. So providing different events around the country where you can meet up with other families, and our customised book service where we provide modified books into whatever format your child requires. So with this, there's quite a number of services, and when we can support you across the board. So and obviously our habilitation officers work all around the country. So if you've got any other questions about habilitation, they're there to support you too.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'm aware like the time is pressing on, so thank you, Sam. I'm going to just go straight into, we've got a few prepared questions, and then parents, we will see if you want to ask questions of your own, and we've got some themes picked out already that we know need to be covered. So the first question is I'm going to put to the panel. To begin, it would be helpful to turn to a few of you to share your top tips on how a VI child's needs are communicated with the school and teachers. So how they're communicated to the new school that the child is moving on to. So there's a few different things. So I know I'm going to turn to Rabina, who can talk about how Manchester Sensory Support Service, what they do as a service. I'll turn to Andrea as well from how much the Senkos can coordinate from the different schools. And then we've got a couple of some from both our parent panellists tonight, some of their top tips as well. So Rabina, is that okay if I go to you first, please?
Okay, so first of all, we handed over to the school what's called a visual management profile. And that details advice, strategies on how to support the child. In that document, you know, we would first of all start with what their eye condition is, you know, and how it impacts on them. We would mention if they need a particular print size, whether they need to be sitting at the front or have a clear line of vision from one particular eye or the other. We might detail how they prefer to write or record, whether they use a laptop or whether they do, you know, they do actually handwrite. We would, in that profile, we would discuss, you know, how the pace of lessons. We might specify that they need additional time to keep up and complete tasks. We'd talk about lighting, you know, and make sure they sit with the back to the window, for example, something like that, avoid glare. In it, we would also mention assessment guidance, you know, whether they need additional time or rest breaks. We'd also mention what sort of equipment they're used to using, you know, what would be beneficial, whether it's a magnifier, electronic magnifier, an iPad, for example. And we might perhaps mention social emotional well-being in the document, and this, you know, the sort of support and service that we as a service would offer. We'd also hold transition meetings anyway. I'm actually doing those at the moment via Zoom, because obviously we can't meet face to face at the moment, but I have taken part in some transition meetings already, you know, from children transitioning from year 6 to year 7, or from year 11 going on to further education colleges. Another thing we do is we would deliver visual impairment awareness training. We actually have sessions where we are based, where we invite staff from I mean, I happen to be, at the moment, I'm in charge of organising the secondary training. So we would invite staff from all the secondary settings, you know, focusing actually on children who happen to be transitioning. And, you know, we might perhaps deliver a PowerPoint and hold a carousel of activities for staff to take part in. Or we may go into a school and deliver specific training specific to that child as well. So they're the three main things I would say we do around transitioning.
That's great. Thanks, Robina. So that was kind of really informative to hear how you as a service can communicate the needs to the new school as well, and then doing some other activities surrounding that. Thank you. Andrea, could I come over to you now to have the special educational needs coordinator's viewpoint as well?
I think a lot of what Robina said, I would just echo in terms of how important it is for your secondary SENCO to be liaising with the VI service and those that have supported you know, your child through the primary setting, and not to forget that obviously we know nothing about you know, your child in terms of the primary work that, you know, that they've done and how well or how successful they've been, or the struggles that they've faced. So from my point of view, you know, I always make it my top priority to liaise, and where possible to go to the annual review of the child that's at primary school, to have a real insight into what the needs are. Obviously all VIs present differently, so for me it's getting to know the child as opposed to just an EHCP, because, you know, and not just for VI students, you know, I think it's very easy to just read reports and find out, yes, a lot about what the, you know, what the condition is and how they're supported at primary school each day, but it's actually getting to meet that child as well, and also then having a much more focused relationship with the SENCO there about how they, or what, you know, what they're going to suggest in terms of the transition. We've had students come up with a teaching assistant from their primary school to do additional transition sessions, more importantly to sort of get to know the school, the site. Obviously that goes hand in hand with risk assessments or PEEPs, you know, evacuation plans, etc. So there's sort of some quite logistical things to do, but also I think in offering the, you know, that relationship, we've got a very good relationship, as I say, with our VI team. They know the child very well, so they, as well with primary SENCO, will give us that additional information to help us to best plan for that transition into secondary. And it is hard when, again, you know, they might have come around on an open evening many like a year ago or so, and so actually their understanding of the site, unless, you know, parents are really proactive, and it's about parents as well, I think, you know, don't be afraid to badger the secondary schools and say, look, we really need to come around again, or, you know, I'm feeling like this, what can you do to help? And I think that's important, because I think sometimes there's such a reliance on the primary school because you're sort of so focused on to tying everything up there, that actually you do need to get in touch with your secondaries, and, you know, and vice versa. And again, we also have on a morning each week, we have extra CPD time for the whole staff. So those with, particularly with visual impairments, I actually invite the VI team in from the local authority to come and do additional support for training and advice for all staff. So it's not just the teachers that might teach your child, it's every member of staff of the school. And I think personally that's really important.
That's great. Thank you so much, Andrea. It's really fantastic to hear about a whole school approach that yeah, it's heartening to hear. And we've got two parents on the panel, and they've both got some different tips to share. Fiona, is it okay to come over to you, because I know that you've got some extra meetings going on for your daughter at this time?
Yes, when my daughter was going through this time, when she was about to start in year 7, she did have lots of extra transition from primary school. I know that can't happen properly at the moment because of this situation, but and then once she did start, my priority was making sure I had contact details for the SENCO, the tutor, who is it that I need to contact to, if anything happened when she came home, you know, who is it? Because with primary school it's different, you know how to contact the school, there's less staff, you need to find out who is it that I contact if I have a concern when she comes home. We did have more than just the annual review, we did have meetings every sort of 8 weeks, which was really helpful, because there's going to be lots of issues will arise, so it's good to know that you can get those meetings in the diary, maybe one at least near the start of the term and one towards the end of the first. That was my main tip, to have regular meetings planned in and get the contact details of the key staff.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that before this session, Fiona and we all discussed a lot of things, just me and Fiona and me and all the other panelists, and that was something we really felt was essential, that if you do plan meetings, if it's a lot of admin on the parents, but to make them, put them in the diary and make people accountable, and don't be afraid to do that badgering. It's a lot of legwork though, isn't it, Fiona? I think. At
the time I did for quite a lot of, well, since my daughter lost her sight, I had to reduce my work hours dramatically. I just needed that time to, like you say, the admin and the emotional side of things, just to have that space to get a grip on so many things, the meetings, the phone calls, the emails, just having that space. So it is difficult if you are working as well. It's good to have groups like Look that you can ring up if you you're really stuck, like what should I do, just to get some advice from somebody who's not personally involved has been really good.
Sometimes and people that aren't judging you and that have empathy for the situation, but can be that step away as well, like you say, Fiona. Thank you. And then Kathy, there was something really, really inventive that your children did. That could you share it? I thought it was just wonderful kind of personal
I think it's
touch.
what you're talking about. I'm just backing up everything Fiona said. And I think the main difference, obviously, is that they're going from one teacher to several teachers. And no matter how brilliant your Senko is, there is going to be that teacher that just forgets everything and that's too busy, that can't handle the class. So it was a good idea, actually. We did it with Will. We didn't do it with Emily Ruth. It came later on.
Okay,
So what he did, and he wanted to do it, so it depends on your child, I suppose. We videoed him talking about, so they could see his face. So we knew he's got a mop of red hair as well, so you won't forget him. But just talking about his condition, but in really simplistic terms. So what he can see, what can't he see, what he likes to do, what he doesn't like to do. Because the one thing that was different from Will to Emily is Will didn't want anyone behind him. Will didn't want somebody sitting there. He's a young lad. He didn't even like getting his laptop off. That's took years. I'll tell you that now. That's took years. No matter how wonderful the equipment is, and he doesn't want anyone. His friends. He talks about his condition, but he doesn't really want to be the boy in the corner. The boy the teacher goes, Will, is that big enough for you? So it was very much telling them what he wanted and what he enjoys, and that's worked really well.
Oh, thank you. It's not necessarily something that everyone's going to feel comfortable to make, but if your child does feel like, actually, yeah, I could do that, it is having a face to that document that Rabina was talking about, having a face to that information can just really help increase the message and where it's going. The question was that we got going with, what are your top tips on communicating on getting the VI needs of your child communicated to the new school? And obviously for Chloe, it's not just VI needs, it's other sensory needs. So the teachers at the new school understand, how she learns and why she uses different bits of kit. And I know it's an ongoing process for you, isn't it, Jane? That it's potentially a longer answer. But
we need to really look at it. But actually, she did make a video.
That's amazing.
She wanted people. I think her friends at school had stopped being able to really get what she needed. She kept saying, they keep running away from me, I don't know where they are. So she one day at Easter last year, she said, I want to make a video to tell people how it is. So and also it's lovely, it's about all the things she can do as well. But it was really good. The school was open to it, and in the assembly, but when everyone started, every year got to see the video, and all the teachers got to see it before school started. So when they had their 2 kind of enrichment days before, so that was it was helpful. It didn't solve everything, but at least she felt that maybe she started the school feeling that people would understand her a bit, which I felt was really important. I was thinking about this before. this meeting. It's like maybe writing a letter or whatever your child can do, drawing pictures, you know, just to be able to say what's important.
Yeah, so it kind of supports the information that would have come from the professionals, that the child's voice and all of that is heard too.
Yes, and
Yeah.
actually what's important to her is different from maybe the QVTI, who, you know, it's the braille equipment and the use of the cane and all that, but actually that's what one of the biggest lessons I've learned is actually it's what's important to Chloe makes a difference to the success really of the school placement, if that makes sense.
Perfect, thank you. I can just see that, thank you, Jane, that that there's a parent who wants to ask a question now. Sue, could I turn over to you, Sue?
Hi everybody, I'm interested in what Jane is saying, because my son is SVI and HI as well, and always has been. But I would like to see that video of Chloe. I think it would really help, because how effective is that? And not just reading an EHCP, Jamie looks horrific, but when you meet him, he looks perfectly within normal limits. But would Jane be happy to share that video to give us all a bit of confidence?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Chloe,
thanks,
it was shared somewhere, like, you know, when she started.
Was it on Facebook? Was it the video where she's scooting or cycling near your house, Jane? I think I've seen it.
It helps when my brother's a filmmaker.
Yeah,
my
it was
niece,
beautifully made.
it's about 4 minutes long, but she would be really pleased, because I think it did make a big difference, and she's happy to. It's Vimeo, but it's public, so we can just send a link to people.
Perfect. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, definitely. We can put it in with the info that we'll send everybody after the event today. So that's great. Yeah. Thank you so much. We've kind of, on the theme of what the young person wants, we've got another question that I really want to turn to the panelists on, because I know a lot of you ahead of tonight's session have got questions about supporting your child's friendships. What advice can be shared regarding dealing with bullying? So I'm going to turn to a few people within the panel for some lived experience and for some professional advice. And actually, Lorna, panelist Lorna, hi Lorna, can we turn over to you about kind of how you navigated those friendship situations at school? Because I know that you had some different experiences to share today.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it short. It's not massively short. Yeah. I said at the beginning of this that I went to secondary schools. I changed secondary school halfway through year 10, which everybody said was the worst idea in the world. But kind of my experience was that I went to my first secondary school with one student who I was at primary school with, not particularly good friends with, but just at least it was somebody I knew. And if I'm honest, I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb sort of straight away from the off, like from the first day when they kept me in my tutor group while they explained to everybody who I was and what I was before I could join the main group. And they started with a buddy system, so who would spend a day with me to walk between classes and lunch and breaks, which sort of worked, but sort of didn't, because they were still being forced. It worked in a sense of just introductions, and the trouble is you can't force people to be friends. You can't force people to have things in common. I had one really good friend who I made in year 8, fostered and got transferred to different foster carers up in Oxford, which is miles away, in that summer between year 8 and year 9. So for me, things went downhill from there, and I wasn't bullied. There was one incident where an idiotic child sprayed me in the eyes with some glitter spray, which was painful. But that was one incident, and kind of from there, it wasn't dealt with very well. And also, a lot of friends, so more her friends than mine, were kind of upset that she'd got in trouble. And essentially, my experience of school was not talking to anybody, not being bullied by anybody, but not talking to anybody. And I knew my way around the school at that point. I'd been there a few years, and I would walk by myself. I would walk at breaks and lunches by myself, which is obviously just depressing. Academically, didn't really have any worries. I was very lucky and was very well supported academically. So yeah, it was then we scoped out this other school, which sadly doesn't exist in that form. It's an academy now, but it was amazing. And it was also purpose-built for disabled people, so they had quite a few quite severely disabled students. It was all wheelchair accessible. And sort of there, in the nicest possible way, compared to some of the other disabilities that the kids were used to seeing, I wasn't really that disabled. And they just took me as I was. And I went from kind of feeling like the being stuck out like a sore thumb to, say, not being the most disabled kid in the school. And just the difference in their attitude towards me was pretty incredible. Yeah, they said I was going to fail on my GCSEs, and thankfully my mum was incredibly supportive and said she didn't care if I failed on my GCSEs because it's better than misery. And actually, I didn't fail any of my GCSEs. But the school I went to had a much worse academic reputation. Didn't have a good reputation, not the nicest of areas, a much rougher school, but I had such a better time there, and I had friends. And they always have their own challenges. And I think the lesson from that, I think my mum would say the lesson from that is that you have to be ready for a fight. She had to fight for that to happen for me, and I'm extremely grateful to her. And without her as my parent fighting for that to happen, it wouldn't have happened. And the school I was at, the first school I was at, were never going to fix the problems because they couldn't really. And part of it's luck of the draw, part of it's I think I just got the wrong year, the wrong classmates. And there's parts of that you can't control. But I think, yeah, sort of thinking how this very long story is actually useful to you as parents.
Yeah, I think it is,
yeah.
Lorna. I think that motivation to champion your child's needs, I think that's really heartfelt, essential.
I'm incredibly grateful.
Yeah.
My mother will she'll argue when people say she can be terrifying, but she can. I think I needed that. There's been times where she's had to fight for me to get what I need, and that would be my message to parents: is be ready for a fight.
Yeah.
If obviously, fingers crossed, hopefully you won't need to do that.
Yeah. But I think that following the path that your child's going to be happiest in is you're not alone. So Kathy, I know that you did that for your son, didn't you? That was a bit more tricky to get to, was the positive result for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, originally he went to a local school that the Senko it just looked wonderful, really, and it was easy for him to get the bus. So we thought about all that. He seemed quite happy. He'd been there 3 or 4 times, luckily between summer and starting. But it was quite evident by year 8, although he was getting all the support and he was doing okay, he was miserable. And at the times I cried and he cried, putting him out the bed, and that's when I thought, this is how old was he then? 13-year-old child. I thought no. So he then ended up going to a school in Hagley, so that's a train and a bus away, with friends that he was at secondary school with who knew him. And whilst I've had to really fight there to get him heard and etc., it's worked out really well. The most important thing is really happy. He may not get the grades, but I just want him to be happy.
You can retake GCSEs, that.
you can retake them, but obviously you're the parents here today, you're really looking to make that journey from year 6 to year 7 as positive as possible. And I'm really, as we were planning this, Andrew and I were discussing some of the things that are going on in her school, and there's some wonderful ideas out there about what schools can do to make some safe, welcoming places within the everyday school life.
Listening again to some of those comments, and in particular the year 11 lad, VI lad that's just leaving us now, we sort of felt that initially he needed a little bit more support at lunchtime. I think the unstructured times and the the break and lunch times where the staff aren't, you're not in a lesson, you've got your sort of free time. It's where do I go? Am I going to be okay to get there? Can I get there safely? And all those things. And so we put together, it's staffed by teaching assistants. There are things in there to do at lunchtime, so you can go on the computer, do homework. You can just sit on the soft seat and listen to music, play on some of the instruments. You can do nothing. You can just talk to some staff. And what I would say, because I'm trying to keep a balance for you here, that this is an important time for transition. But our particular, and not just one, but a few of our VI students wanted to go there initially as sort of a safe place to find their feet, but then very quickly, were taken under their wing by some incredibly thoughtful students that had never met them before. They went to different feeder primary schools, and I always remember the one time our VI lad going down the stairs and one of his friends stopped and said, "Oh, your shoelaces, let me get your shoelaces," and sort of pulled together in some of the stories that you might not always hear, but actually was, lots of our students taken under their wings, but that's sort of supported to begin with by the hub at lunchtime. We found that was an area of the school day that was a little bit more problematic. And actually, pleased to say that by sort of year 8, he no longer came to the hub, he didn't need it. So we found that was a really important part of our school, and the reason we've kept it going, and we cap it at so many students. So it's not, we have students in there, on the autistic spectrum who just find the whole canteen at lunchtime an overloading sensory experience. So this just gives them a bit of a breakaway. They don't have to come. They can come in on a Monday and not again till Thursday. They can come in every day if they like. But that was an important part of our school. Obviously, we would do extra transition work, and that, I think, for me, as a SENCO, is probably my biggest problem area at the moment, because obviously we just don't have the ability to do that. So I think, again, just making sure that you're contacting your school. And I'd echo what was said earlier about primary school is very different, because you tend to have one teacher that can kind of feedback for every area of school. Whereas, at secondary, you're going to have tutors, class teachers, heads of years, deputies. So there's quite a lot of different people you specifically need, and particularly with VI, always get to know the SENCO really well. And I think, as was said earlier, I personally welcome more meetings. The more meetings that we have, the better we'll get to know your child and your needs. So again, don't just think it's down to the annual review. Don't just think it's down. We also do as well a meet the tutors evening about 3 or 4 weeks into the start of term, and it works really well, because actually you get to meet your child's tutor, and also any other key members of staff. But you can always book in those appointments. I would just say book the appointment to make sure you've got it, and I'm going to say as far as having to minute everything, but I do, if I'm meeting parents, make sure that that note's on file. And I think, as Lorna said, the buddy system has its merits and has its place, but I think, again, particularly at secondary, it's really hard to force those friendships and to force people that don't necessarily want things in common. And also, I think, to finish on this point, some of our VI kids do not want any attention drawn to themselves. They do not want to be, identified as anybody that looks different, has any different treatment, albeit that reports show that they do need that, albeit that I've seen some students struggle, and this has been, I think, probably quite a challenging area, seeing students struggle in class but don't want to say their view of where they're sitting in class. So they're sort of the tougher ones, because actually you're trying to support somebody that perhaps doesn't want it, and it's sort of trying to get around those barriers. There are ways. And also we have what's called a student profile or student passport, which is just a one-page document, and it just outlines, name, picture, what the SEN need is. So in this case of a VI, and that is sent to all staff ahead of time. I do a whole school CPD session where I introduce all of the students that will have a student passport and outline their needs, and then it just starts to set up things ahead of students coming into class. So you've got the booklets enlarged if they need to be, or you've got the magnifier, or you've got the laptop or the iPad, and it's not a case of sort of staff on the very first day going, "Oh, sorry, I didn't enlarge that print for you. Hold on, I'll just go and ask somebody to run off and do it now." And you don't want it to be an afterthought. So planning ahead, I think, is key.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I know that all our panelists can answer every question, but I'm aware that time is moving on. So thank you so much. I feel like we've got lots of information. And we're just starting in your answers there to sort of touch on some of the things that will make dealing with day-to-day life in this much bigger environment potentially more achievable. So I think there's so much to consider in this new environment, from the physical size of their new school, the different people workload and potentially kind of different social pressures within high school to those that they've experienced in primary school. And I think it'd be great for the panelists to share some advice on how they navigate that the bigger space and the bigger pressures from workload and emotional time. So Sam and Angela, I'll come over to you in turn first and then to Ellie. So Sam, is that all right if I come to you and hear your advice?
Yeah, I think I've found that in my experience it tends to be the difficult times of day are the lunch times and the transitions between lessons, the moving around safely, and the sheer volume of people. And actually, with the current advice on social distancing, that might actually have some positive benefits in that one-way systems may be introduced around schools, where actually that's going to make life easier for your child in getting from A to B. Lunch times in some schools may be staggered now, and again that kind of it's less of an intense experience perhaps, so there may be some positives that actually come out of this situation. I think pace of learning is probably one of the most difficult things, and that's quite difficult to for a child to get their head around. So I think organisational skills might come into that, making sure your child is aware of how the in order to be ready to get to whatever their transport is on time. Keep in really close touch with your QTVI and your HAB officer, so that they may be able to offer you advice on routes to school. They might not be able to come out with you at the moment, but if they know the key routes, they'll know the difficult points and may be able to offer you advice as parents, so you can sort of practice those routes to school with them. And I think maybe teaching them 2-meter rule, actually. What is 2 meters? Is your child aware of what that feels like? How the sounds are different? And I'm sure Angela will be able to offer a little bit more information on that. But I think it's, it is a big step, but everybody's going to be in a slightly different situation in September, and it's important to remember it's not, your children are no different in that aspect for every child, and everybody's going to be feeling a bit nervous.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. It's great to from this chaos to also find some positives. That was really really interesting. Angela, I think from a HAB point of view, I think it'd be interesting to hear about how HAB skills can help a young person in their new environment, and that would be lovely.
Yes. So with habilitation training, obviously a large part of that is mobility training, and that with transition planning, we would probably look at transition in year 5. Throughout the whole of your child's journey through infants and primary, habilitation and mobility training is about building on the skills each year and offering your child, increasing the challenges each year, increasing their levels of independence and being able to articulate impairment, to be able to kind of normalize it. For your child, having a visual impairment is part of their identity, and it's important that they are able to understand about what their eye condition is, and it's important that they are able to talk about it. I love the idea of the videos. I think anything like that, assemblies, and having some help from their sighted peer group is all about being part of, and being absolutely central. And hearing from Lorna, her experiences, while she was successful in one respect with the academic side of it, socially, she felt, she was sort of on the periphery of the school, and we never want that. That's not what habilitation and mobility training is about. We totally advocate the child being central to the school, being confident with their peer group and being able to articulate. So we do lots and lots of work emotional well-being, and including, you know, the training isn't in isolation to the child with a visual impairment. It includes everybody, their whole peer group. And so what we also look at is holding workshops. You know, we sort of, you know, habilitation specialists all around the UK, you know, we all work sort of in a fairly similar way, and we would always try to advocate having workshops, you know, during school holidays. And we held some amazing workshops where we have our VI children, and they all get to know each other year on year, and they form some really lovely friendships, and their confidence is amazing. I see them every year, and every year I see the difference in them, and they come in, they kind of dump their long canes on the table, and they get stuck into, you know, whatever the workshop is about. The transition from primary to secondary it's a nerve-wracking time, isn't it, for all children? What we don't want to see is any anxiety above those normal anxiety levels. Every child will have a level and degree of anxiety about moving from the comfort of their primary school that they know, they're familiar with, moving to that bigger school. The transition, we start in year 5, and we start to think about the child. What are their levels? What are their skills levels? What do we need to put in place in year 5? Because with exams, we can't always have them for the whole of year 6. There's a lot of things that, you know, has to happen in schools. So a lot of my training would happen in year 5. What that also means is that your child doesn't have to wait. See, we can take them over to the school, we can start to show them around. And one of the things that we would do is complete an environmental access report. And it's nice actually to be able to take your child over to the school at that point, and that's where we walk around with usually a Senko, could even be the head teacher, and we will literally do a route of the whole school, and working with your child, we would identify some of the access, the nosings, you know, the steps on the edges of the steps need highlighting if they need to be able to use any residual vision. We'll look at the lighting contrast around the building. We'll look at the outside areas. And that again is about your child having their voice and what would be appropriate for them, because, you know, visual impairment comes in all formats, and we want to child. It might not be right for another child, but the adaptations that we want to put in place need to be right for your child. So it's always quite nice to do the environmental access audit with your child. That's always helpful. And then when it comes to mobility training and route familiarisation around the school, yes, it's a massive school. Secondary schools are so much bigger. However, we take it down. We take that down to small steps. Okay, so we would literally just focus to begin with, small areas, and we would work, you know, become really familiar with those small areas, and then we'd have a look at another small area, and then we look at linking them, which becomes a slightly bigger area then, and then we'd have a look at another small area, and then we'd link that, so that becomes a bigger area. So we take it down to very small steps to begin with, to make it manageable, to make it achievable as well. And gradually you build up a picture, a map, and we can do that during term time. That's often achievable to do that, but it may or may not be achievable to do the route to the school, because that could involve public transport.
I just want to bring in Ellie, one of our mentors is here, because she cannot stay till the very end of today's session, because I'd love, Ellie, for you to share what you did at the start and how you also changed what you did in terms of that navigating your school layout, and why, and how, because you had some really interesting reflections on that.
In terms of my school, so I had a VI unit school. Overall, my experience was incredibly positive. I was the only, well, I wasn't the only VI student. At the time, I was the only Brailleist, and I was also the only one from my primary school who went to that secondary school. So I was essentially starting with a clean slate. I hadn't had very good experiences in primary school with socially navigating, sort of circumventing all of the start of teenage hormones, etc. So when I went to secondary school, I was terrified. I was also a very angry child because of certain things that had happened in my childhood, which kind of made me almost overconfident. So I put myself out there to the point where people always had to notice because I didn't know what else to do. And as much as that was incredibly probably frustrating for people, I ended up having a really good group of friends, and right from the get-go, I kind of forced myself. It was almost like fake it till you make it. I forced myself to try make people want to talk to me and use myself as a conversation starter so that people didn't get bored and go away. And of course, like, it was really difficult at first, and I found myself thinking, like, what's the point? Why am I doing this? No one likes me, etc. But it did work. As much as it was a very kind of bull in the china shop way of doing it, I found that making myself more confident made me more confident. And as time started to move on, I obviously realized that head first into situations wasn't always the best way to do things. And so I started to learn how to be a little bit more tactful. I had to self-advocate all the time, because although my school was really, really good and remains really good, there were things. I had some negative experiences with one of my Senkos, and I had to navigate this huge environment that I'd never really been in. And unfortunately, within the classroom setting, teaching assistants didn't quite understand, give me my own space. So I always felt crowded. And because I'd stopped being incredibly forward, I then struggled to say, stop hounding me. Please, can I have some time with my friends to just have a nice time? You know, don't tell me off for talking when the teacher hasn't told me off for talking. That's not your job. But I couldn't really say that when I was younger. As I grew older, I started to be able to say it more. I almost became more brave enough to actually tell them, you know, I know you mean well, but please, please, please don't do this way. That's a really tough lesson to learn. And you can't expect a year 7 or a year 6 going into a year 7 to suddenly pop out with this, you know, uber self-confidence and to say, oh yeah, I know exactly what I want. There are stumbling blocks along the way, like so many stepping stones you have to get by. But luckily my parents supported me. My friends did it as well. I mean, I changed friendship groups significantly during school, but I think that's relatively normal. And at the end of it, I came out with really, really good grades. There were difficulties. There were times when my mental health worsened and I found it incredibly difficult to even go to school. But I would say the only way I got through was to assert my confidence, even if I didn't feel like it. And part of the reason I did that was because of my parents and because of the people I surrounded myself with. And again, it's never going to be easy. You're never going to have one solution that fits all. But I think the best way to stick with your friendships is to self-advocate and know what you want, know what you need, and make sure everybody is fully aware of that fact.
Cool. Thank you so much. That was really, really helpful.
I'm going to head off now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, but it's been lovely to speak to you all, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Ellie. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. So yeah, Ellie was saying as well that sometimes her needs change. So in terms of, so she used the tactic of at times to leave lessons early and be ahead of the crowds in the corridors, which is something that quite a few of the VI young people involved with Look do choose to do. But Ellie didn't do it at first and then returned to using that tactic when she the noise and the physical environment was just another thing on her to-do list that she couldn't be dealing with at that time. So don't view it as something that is set in stone how your child navigates school, because there can be flexibilities, was her key piece of advice as well. I know that there's a parent, Claire Jones, that you've got a specific subject question. Is that okay, Claire, if we turn to you?
Hi, yeah, I did put on the group chat that I've got quite a lot of anxiety around my daughter's Lacey May. She's severely sight impaired. She's got autosomal dominant optic atrophy, which we are yet to meet anybody else that's got that. That's her age. We've really struggled with that. But she struggles academically as it is. Obviously, having this massive chunk out due to lockdown, homeschooling hasn't happened. She just won't engage with it at all. And although the schools say, oh, it's fine, you know, there's no obligation, I'm concerned that how far behind she's going to get, obviously having not done any schoolwork. Although she is returning next week because she's on an EHCP, she could have been at school the whole time, but I've decided to send her in after half term. But my biggest, well, not my biggest worry, because I've got, as we do have VI children, we worry about everything, is how she's going to cope with the workload. Because homework and things is one thing that we really struggle with, and we have done all the way through primary school. Because at the end of the day, she comes home, she's very visually fatigued. Her condition affects her in a lot of ways. She has photophobia. She's got no peripheral. She's got very limited central vision. Although to look at her, you wouldn't know. She just gets on with it. But
yeah,
we've got 2 secondary schools in Newquay. All of her friends are going to one. She's going to the other one because they could better support her with her VI needs. So we've got a lot of sort of worries about her making friends and all of that sort of thing. But it's mainly the sheer volume of work that they have.
Yeah.
I could help with a little bit of that if that's of use.
Yeah, could we turn to Andrea and Rabina? Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, and it's something that a particular student of ours, it wasn't so much of an issue year 7 and 8 because workload, albeit there's that difference in primary to secondary. But this particular student really felt it in year 9, when at that point, we've just reverted now, but at that point we did a 3-year key stage 4, so year 9, 10 and 11 were all the GCSE years. And actually my advice to you would be I would perhaps try and look at the EHCP wording of that. So as you start to in terms of if your child is feeling fatigued, if it's having an impact on social, emotional, well-being, sleep, all the rest of it. Because what we did was we actually dropped one of the option subjects for our student, and by no means did that have a negative effect. It was it wasn't an overnight decision, but it was how best can we use that time. And we found that bearing in mind as well, for example, English GCSEs changed dramatically in the fact that there was no coursework. It was 100% terminal exam. The English literature exam is 2 hours 15 minutes. This student got 100% extra time because of their VI needs. That meant it could potentially be a 4 exam. So we had to look at it sort of holistically from his well-being, and actually we dropped one of the option blocks. So in that time, the TA worked to do some extra catch-up work on the core subjects of English, Maths and Science. And that worked really well, because it took a little bit of the onus of another subject that perhaps he wasn't going to take forward into a post-16 or to a college, and allowed him time and we found that with the mock exams he was wiped out with the extra time, and that was actually absolutely the right decision for him. Some of these ways or fixes might not be for everybody, but we get to know the students really well. We listen to the student as well, and he absolutely felt that if he had that extra time, he'd be able to really focus on the things that matter more, but that were really important to him. So I would just be really guided by your child. Speak to the school, talk about different ways. You'll find now that the curriculum, and with the new Ofsted framework coming out, it's all about intent. It's all about having the curriculum match to the needs, but particularly with an EHCP, there are differences that need to be accounted for.
We had our annual review quite early on this year. Thankfully, we weren't caught up with all of the coronavirus and lockdown going on, but I asked them about a reduced curriculum, and they did say that's something they can look at later and down the line, obviously, because it's more important.
Yeah.
So like you say, come year 9, but she does also suffer with anxiety. She has low mood, and she can't really express why she feels the way she does. So that worries me, because I don't want her to sort of get into a point where she's struggling and won't say, look, I'm feeling quite low. And I just think that I just worry about her. I know when she gets anxious, she does start to sleepwalk as well. So it's a good indicator when she's getting stressed and not feeling well, because she starts wandering around the house half asleep. So
again, making notes of these observations and just connecting with school, because I think sometimes people do think all schools are secondary schools are so big, they're so different. They are different to primaries, but we do know our kids really well, and I know some schools are much bigger than the one I work in, but we do get to know our kids really well. So I think it's just about being on top of that and being really transparent with your school as to what's happening at home, and then looking at the best workarounds or adjustments. I think sometimes you sort of think, oh, it's not written in the EHCP, therefore it can't happen, and I wouldn't agree with that at all. The EHCP is a working document, it does need to be reviewed, and upon those you can ask for for other meetings as well to discuss that. So just making sure that your child's sort of at the front of that, as quite rightly you are.
When you say about if it's not in the EHCP, we saw her paediatrician person not long ago, and it was a different person, but they're looking at whether Lacey suffers with inattentive ADHD, but obviously there's not been any more I haven't had any more contact about that. Well, if I express that that's obviously another issue, because she quite often goes away with the fairies, she's in her own little world, she doesn't really pay attention. Take that into account as well, even though there isn't
I mean, what I would say to that is, if as you start to gather more evidence, and if you feel that has a real impact on on the educational setting, you can call for an emergency annual review if you feel that there's been significant change to it, and then that then brings forward the annual review and adds in any other information, or outside agencies or any other therapists or anybody that they're working with. So again, I wouldn't, it's a working document, so it's supposed to reflect sort of things that happen today might be different that happen next month. So I wouldn't worry too much, but just the annual reviews, if you feel there's a significant need, you can bring the annual review forward. Have your evidence, have your reports, have them present if they can be at the emergency annual review meeting as well, and that can all be taken into consideration.
Okay.
Lorna, can we go to you and then to Robina as well? Just see if there's any more from the QTVI to add on to that.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying about reducing the curriculum, because I think that the extra lessons, the free time, it can be really important. Some schools do 9 GCSEs. I've known of people who've done 11, and I did 7, and that was plenty. It was quite enough. It was all the core subjects plus the things I was interested in. I did music and drama, but all the sciences, maths and English. Yeah. But they've because I did 7 GCSEs, I couldn't tell you how many now, but I had several 4 or 5 free lessons a week that were out of the classroom, and that was catch up time, and that was just time to do anything. Some things just take a little bit longer. Particularly maths is a really common one for VI people struggle with, or just doing the reading you've got to do for English at GCSE level. All this stuff takes extra time, and I'm also a chronic insomniac as well, so I was always exhausted. And I think there's no problem. You don't need to do as many GCSEs as you possibly can. Get the core subjects, and the well-being and the free time. For me, when I went to my second school, I had an hour journey to get to school, and a Wednesday morning actually started with 2 lessons out of the classroom, and they used to let me come in an hour later on a Wednesday, and that really helped me with my own kind of fatigue, getting up an hour later on a Wednesday morning. So it's all things like this, and generally the schools are really good with being flexible with this, and I think it's important to get the balance right between, of course you want to be ambitious for your child, but also thinking about what they can cope with.
The mental health is equally as important, isn't it? So,
yeah, definitely. Robina, from the VI service point of view, is there more advice you would share about?
Yeah, just echoing what Andrea and Lorna said. I've worked with children and young people where they've had a reduced timetable. I agree with Lorna, you don't need to get 10, 11, 12 GCSEs. And so I've worked with students where they have dropped a subject, and they've used that time to catch up in perhaps the course. On our visual management profile, we talk about differentiation of task and the pace of lessons, and we say they might need additional time to keep up and complete tasks. We also advise you keep copying to a minimum, provide own copies where possible. They don't yeah, we just want a reduction in copying tasks, really. They don't need to copy down everything. If the work is already provided, they can use that. There are lots of texts. If they can access them electronically as well, sometimes that helps. Rather than handwriting, sometimes they can record answers if they want to. You know, we've had students doing that in the past as well.
She has got she's got our vision support, our vision service down in Cornwall here. They've sourced a Connect 12 for her, so she uses that.
Yes, yeah.
And they've said that she should be typing all of her work, because her writing level's at sort of like a year one. She's really her handwriting's not brilliant, so her vision's so poor that they've said typing. So having that Connect 12 has helped, but it's trying to encourage her to use it, because she's adamant that she still wants to write, and she's been touch typing since year one, so she can use a keyboard. It's just trying to make sure she knows that's what she needs to be doing. So
yeah. And that's hard, isn't it? Because the emotional side of things, that they don't, a lot of the young people we work with, and I'm sure Rabina, you'll see this, that they don't want to use the thing that makes them look different, even more different than they already feel. And that's hard.
Yeah, I've had conversations with young people about that, and you know, that's, well, would you rather have the enlarged worksheets, because they don't like that either. And what I've tried to do is say, well, this is actually encouraging you to be independent if you're using assistive technology, you know, to help you. You know, and sometimes that, you know, that may work. I mean, I don't know really. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that to know that you can have that communication with the new school as well, Claire, that it doesn't, you don't have to wait for the annual review, like Andrea said. Thank you.
Yeah,
and I know that.
I mean, make sure you've got the details of your contact details of the QTVI anyway. You know, mobile, email, because you can contact them anytime. Yeah.
Thank you. I know we've got a question, and I know that there's probably tons more we could digress on with that, Claire. But the next question that a few parents have raised,
I think it was Andrew that had a question about PE, was it?
Is that just general worries and concerns about PE and sort of participation?
Yeah, we've got a few points from, it would be lovely to have your view, and then we've got both Chris and Lorna also had some feedback on PE. Actually, and all the parents, I know everyone's going to have feedback, but please, Angela, yeah, from a HAB point of view, share your thoughts on PE lessons.
Okay, so the government last year, following Public Health England's recommendations, have now published guidance that all young people should have at least 60 minutes of activity a day, and 30 minutes of that should take place in school, 30 minutes of that should take place at home. PE is, I think, a big concern, not just for parents, but for young people as well. I think when they're developing their motor skills, it's about applying them, and it's about having lots of opportunities. And I think when young people get to secondary school, they become very self-conscious. They don't want to be seen as different, and they certainly don't want to be seen as having lower ability than anybody else. But where do they go? How do they turn that around if their lessons are very visual orientated? So what we tend to do as habilitation specialists, we work with the teachers. I also work with the QTVIs in our sensory service. We all work together on this because there's two elements. There is the actual teaching and learning aspect, which the QTVI very much feeds into, and I feed into it on the sort of the motor skills level. And together we support teachers and give them the skills to be able to know how to set up a successful PE lesson and how to deliver the teaching so that the young person can learn the skills. We're very much in favour of inclusive PE level, inclusive PE lessons. That's not to say that, you know, all young people with a visual impairment are going to enjoy playing rugby or they will enjoy playing other games. It's about finding something that they enjoy, and with all young people, it's trial and error, you know, in terms of which games they're going to enjoy. But we're very much focused on ensuring that teachers feel confident to teach an inclusive PE lesson, and where we can get young people playing, enjoying games together, I think that's so much more positive than feeling they've got to go into a subgroup if they don't want to. Some young people are very competitive, you know, some people aren't. That's the same for everybody. So as long as we can ensure that teachers know how to confidently teach a successful PE lesson, then I think we're going a long way to be far more inclusive.
Sorry, can I just ask a question, Angela?
Yeah.
Can you just give us an example about what a successful PE lesson is? Because it's very generic, and I was just like, what are 2 key points I can go and say, these are 2 ideas?
Okay.
Thank you.
So, first of all, there's kind of a few things, but first of all, the teacher needs to understand the visual impairment and how it affects the child. So they do need to learn about eye conditions. We would very much be looking possibly at a tactile environment, so that the young person has tactile boundaries, and as an introduction, you would, just as you do route familiarisation, you would do a court familiarisation, so they understand the zone that they are actually going to be taking part in the activity. Clear, simple communication regarding the actual instructions for the game. Don't overcomplicate it. Check their understanding. Check to make sure that all the young people on that court understand what the rules are, how they're going to play. Check to make sure that the young person has the physical ability and understanding. They might not understand what you're actually asking them to do, and check that they actually do have the motor skills, confidence and ability to do what you're asking them to do. So that's a building blocks exercise. You need to know the young person. If you're saying to, you know, if you're doing like a cricket game, you've got to know that they understand what an underarm and overarm throwing is. So check their understanding of their own motor skills, give clear, simple instructions, outline the court or the boundaries, and make sure that the young person knows that the area that they're going to be playing in, operating in. So yeah, and understand their visual impairments as well. So that's some very basic and very sort of generic sort of strategies, but there are lots. We have sort of have a go days where we invite British Blind Sport, and we have lots of different organisations that come along to the Have a Go Day, and that really does build the confidence of the teachers to be able to teach a successful lesson. So it isn't just a quick fit. There's no quick answer to be able to teaching successful PE, but there is there's primary school funding. We also advise on equipment as well, to make sure that schools have the right equipment and that the student can actually use that equipment successfully. So there's lots of things you can do. But it isn't just about going in and giving a leaflet. You have to work with the school, work with the teachers, and work with the specialist organisations as well.
Thanks, Angela. I'm aware that Kathy, who's one of the parents here tonight, needs to go in just a quick, very quickly. So before she goes, Kathy, is it right if we ask about Will? Because Will's PE is a real strong point for him, isn't it? What's benefited his PE lessons?
Well, in all fairness with Will, he's always loved sport. Will has got some useful sight, but he hasn't got any peripheral, and his central vision isn't great at the moment. His condition is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And Emily at 19 now, as you know, her sight's quite severe loss. But he's always wanted to play football. So we actually went, fully enough, British Blind Sports for our key. So I know it's to do with school, but going back to the confidence that Angela mentioned. So we went along one day for a have a go day, a football day, with West Bromwich Albion, and he just loved it. But before then, he was really nervous about, you know, getting hurt or looking to fall, actually, was more of the thing for the boy, not being able to compete with his peers. So I think just that relationship with going to these other organisations that are, you know, really good at sport has supported that. And then going back to the school, and he's able now to speak to them and say, you know, I find that hard, or I can't do this, I can't do that. He's taking GCSE PE at the moment. Somebody asked me on here about, well, what was 7 and 9 like? I think it was really frustrating for him. I think actually he felt, I'm not going to be able to do sport because I can't do it as well as everybody else. But again, having the teacher who looked at the criteria, who tried to make it so he wasn't left out. So when they played football, maybe the football had to be at a certain level. Sometimes he actually brought in a heavier football, so all his friends could play with it as well. I think Chris Stiles, who's on here, has been a really good mentor to Will, and very supportive. And as a result of that, he can see Chris can do it, so he can do it.
Yeah, Chris, could you talk a bit about, thank you so much, Kathy, that's really motivating. Chris, about how PE just remained such a passion for yours throughout your educational journey.
Yeah, so it always was, and even as my sight got worse through school, I still wanted to be a part of PE, because I think getting children into physical education is important for anyone, but with sight loss as well, it's definitely good for that spatial awareness. So as my sight's got worse now into my early 20s, having done sport and exercise before, it means that I can sort of get around a bit easier, and I sort of have an understanding of where I am, just because of having good coordination and like proprioception, so like being able to understand where I am in certain places. So I think making sure that PE is accessible, so I'm glad that there is the public health guideline to make sure children are all doing sport, but it's just finding what they like to do, because I would even do dodgeball, and even though I can't see the ball coming towards me, I just enjoyed that sort of like, oh, I wonder how long I will last in the game before I get hit by the ball. But that was just my attitude, because I'm much more competitive. And as I went through into GCSE, where I studied GCSE PE, my teacher was just very happy and willing for me to participate, and would make changes in order for the criteria to be met to get a grade that I deserved, because I may not be able to do as well as other players. So when I did my football one, it wouldn't seem to be as good, but taking into account my sight loss, the teacher was much more accepting. But it's definitely something that once you go to school, it should be established, and it's, as long as it's following what I think Andrea said, that is the most important thing, to get your child into PE, into something they like, because there's so many blind sports as well out there that there's no excuse really.
That's great, thanks Chris. Yeah, and I know that there's some young people involved with Look who are using some of the VI sports within their PE GCSE, and I think the major piece of information I've learned along I know I'm not a PE teacher, but just that the more your school can then collaborate with organisations like British Blind Sport or Goalball UK into making that sport workable within like their PE GCSE assessments, if you do that earlier on, the better, basically, the more successful that whole process will be. Somebody had a tech question. Vanessa, I think, about a laptop use.
Hello. Yeah, we did touch on it. Thank you. It was just about, I was interested because Kathy said, I think, that her boy was, reluctant to use laptop. And my son he's got bilateral congenital inoperable cataracts, as well as having other special needs, persuading him to use the laptop, but he's very reluctant, and I know we did touch on, perhaps saying, that it's making him independent and all of that, but he's quite adamant that going into secondary school, he doesn't want to have a laptop, and I'm sure it's because he doesn't want to look different to the others. But the thing my question is from the panel members, really, how hard should I pursue him using the laptop, or is it just one thing too many and to go back to handwriting? I don't know.
Okay.
Can I help with this one?
Yeah, Lorna, and then could we also come to Fiona, because I know that she's got some experience of her daughter in that very same situation as well. Yeah, go for it, Lorna.
Cool. I've come across this a lot myself because my role now is to teach people how to use assistive tech, and I was always really keen on the tech. I always liked it. I embraced it straight away. I'm also a more clear-cut case because I don't have any sight. So, and the thing that I always find, and I don't know, Vanessa, your child's level of sight, but I've always found a young person who has got some sight is more kind of determined to use it, so to speak.
Yeah,
and
sounds the case.
Kind of reluctant to use a laptop, or reluctant to use something that makes you stand out, that makes you look like the special one. And I think that's the main issue with reluctance to use special technology, is you're the only one in the class that's got a big laptop in front of them and you feel really conspicuous. I totally get that feeling. I did get that feeling. I used a Braille note more than a laptop when I was in school, and they're smaller, they're much more discreet. Nobody was looking at my screen because it's Braille, so nobody could. And I think you can push it as much as you like. I think if they're never going to go for it, and it's just a losing battle. I worked for about a year and a half with a severely sight impaired girl in my current job, and she was just never going to use it, and really I was wasting my time. She was only using it in the lessons with me when I was supposed to be teaching her how to, and it becomes a slightly arbitrary exercise. I think the middle ground, maybe, he said his motor skills aren't very good, is maybe look at something like an iPad, where you can still tap on the screen to type. They're much more discreet than a laptop. They're lighter to carry around. That's the other issue. I had a bad back by the time I was 16 because of carrying Braille books and all sorts around. So maybe something like an iPad or a tablet might be a good kind of middle ground. And generally, iPads, some schools give an iPad to all the kids, and most of the kids have probably got one at home, so it feels much less kind of special, if that helps.
That's really, really useful. And then there was just one other quick question to Sam, I think it is, about producing books. I didn't understand that part of the role from the special educational supports, because if Callum is writing as well, I've been sort of asking the school to get, exercise books with darker lines, because he can't really, see pale lines on a page. And is that something that I can provide myself, or how do I make sure he gets that? Is there anything you can help me with?
I think there's sort of two lines there. We don't provide books with special lines, but it's the Partially Sighted Society. You can purchase them from there, but schools should really be able to get those for your child. You shouldn't be expected to buy them unless they're purely for home use, but you could put your school onto the Partially Sighted Society. In terms of the books that Guide Dogs will provide, it's a service called Customize. We're going to send some information out through Look afterwards in with the pack, but that's more if you've got a specific book that the child is going to be using, and you want a copy at home. Schools can use the service as well, but if you've got a specific font size or a specific colour of paper or font style, or you want it double spacing in Arial, bold, or whatever it may be, that book could be made to your specification for the recommended retail price. So it won't cost you any more than it would to go and buy the book off the shelf. So if you contact our advice line, we can put you on to customise, and they can talk about your needs. In terms of schools, another service is RNIB Bookshare. I don't know whether you're familiar with that one.
I do that. Just the problem with that is the larger font size is like a giant sized book, and he needs pictures, you know, and it's just, we haven't found one that he likes, you know what I mean, it's age appropriate. Yeah, that isn't really working.
Okay.
But I like the idea if he chooses a book that, you know, he's working on at school, and that we could get one customised for him. That would be good.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to the panel members to give their kind of closing top tips on what they would do what they would recommend to you parents who are supporting your children in their moving on from primary to secondary. And then I know that there's a few other things that we'll need to share at the end. So Fiona, could I come over to you for top tips, and also just on Ellen on her laptop as well? That would be really interesting.
Yeah, laptop. So very similar issue to the lady, is it Vanessa, that asked the question. And agree everything that Lorna was saying about the laptop. Ellen was just the same, didn't want it. It was a massive battle. But my tip would be just give it time. I think there's that much going on when they go into year 7. There's so much change, so much they've got to cope with. You know, pick one battle at a time, and I think just getting through the day was my big thing for a long time. And you know, I reached out for a lot of support from places, and this lockdown, because she's had to use it at home, I think this is going to hopefully bring a change with her, that she has to use it to do her work. Before that, she uses the iPad as well, so she's, like Lorna said, it's maybe a difficult one if you have some sight, because she's using the laptop with JAWS, so screen reader and typing, but also using magnification, so she's having to use the auditory and the visual skills and keep chopping and changing between the two. Yeah, so I just think give it time as well. These things just will take time, and it's up to the young person, and each individual child has got such different needs, and some have got the confidence to speak up, and my daughter definitely hasn't. But that is coming. It's coming with time and with age and experience. Top tips, I think, yeah, get the timetable. That was her big concern before term starts. She was really desperate to have that timetable before day 1, because at her school on the first day they're all given the timetable just on the first day, and of course she can't read it, so the format for her was to have it emailed to us, and then we enlarged it, or we read it to her, and she memorised that timetable before the first day. She relies on her memory a lot, so get the timetable.
Thank you, Fiona. I'll come to everybody in turn. Rabina, is that okay if we come over to you for like your key pieces of advice for the parents here tonight?
So I think I mentioned it already. If you just stay in touch, communication, stay in touch with your QTVI. You know, make sure you know who they are. You've got the details, and also if anything changes, you know, share information with your QTVI and with the school. You know, if your child has been to the eye hospital, if you have any clinical information, you know, please do share, because that helps us to inform inform our advice that we give in schools as well. That's one thing I would say. Thanks,
Rabina. Yeah, definitely, because not everybody will have been party to the information you might have just got at that eye appointment. I think there's sometimes the joined up working that we want to be living in hasn't quite got there yet, so not every bit of information goes to everyone. Thank you. Sam, is it okay if we come over to you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Rabina, but you know, organisational strategies. So trying to encourage your child to be organised. So if they've got to wear a tie that they're not used to, make sure they're adept at tying it before the first day. think about where they're going to keep key bits of new sort of equipment or new things that they're not used to having, like maybe a bus pass or a lunch pass or whatever it is that they're going to have to need. Look at their school bag, as it got sections where they're going to keep things separately. Just encouraging them to be organised, and as Fiona said, getting a timetable and making a copy that you can keep at home so that they get into the habit of every night, packing their bag the night before, so that they're ready for the day ahead, and so that all of those things are in place and they haven't got all those little bits to worry about on top of everything else in September.
Thank you, Sam. That's great. Lorna, have you got things you'd like to add to that?
I think just to echo what's already been said and what I said earlier. I mean, it's a classic cliche. I'm a therapist and I'm going to say talking and listening are the best things that you can do. But, talk to the school, talk to your child, talk to the school. If there's something that needs to be done that's not being done, don't let it lie. Make it happen. And try and impress the same upon your child, depending on how good they are at talking about things when they need them. But just, encourage them to talk to you or to talk to somebody that they feel comfortable talking to if there are any problems. This sounds really doom and gloom. There might not be any problems, but I think that, as Ravina said, the communication is absolutely the key. And hopefully, the school and everybody else involved will have the best of intentions and want to get things absolutely right. I think we all wish Andrea was our Senko, personally.
I know, yeah.
She seems amazing. But yeah, hopefully everybody's got those good intentions. So I do think that communication is the key, and just to think if there are problems, it doesn't mean they're insurmountable, and it doesn't mean they can't be solved. Like I say, I'm a coach. This is what I do. I don't think about problems. I think about solutions, and every problem has a solution. And like I say, fingers crossed, there won't be too many problems. But if there are, take them as they come. Take things in steps, like we were just saying, with trying to convince them to use a laptop as well as first starting secondary school. Just take everything in steps, bite-sized chunks, however big you can handle or your child can handle.
Yeah, doesn't all have to be achieved on day one or week one of this new school. And I would, before I come over to a few other people for your closing remarks, that is, Ellen's just reminds me that Andrea, who's had to go, her key piece of advice was about that channel of communication. Remember, it's there. Keep working with your schools. Obviously, every school will do it differently. Their pastoral support system on your child's emotional well-being, as well as all the other things that are going to make their school day work. And that was also Kathy's key piece of information. Even when, like, maybe on days or weeks that you're having a tougher time in this process, because potentially those days might be there, but to keep the communication positive and to have empathy for the team working with your child as well. She's found that really helpful to remember that the Senko in her son's school has got so many students with so many varied needs, and that teacher is also kind of like the linchpin for so many of those young people. She's got to slot in time with that Senko for her son and just working with her. And another key piece of information Kathy said was, obviously when you're doing parent-teacher meetings in the evenings, and the parents' evening, that sometimes you can go there with your child, but sometimes have some time without your child as well at those. She found that really beneficial. So she could say things that maybe Will wouldn't have been so comfortable hearing. Not to say that she was making decisions for him, but just to do that time, to have that kind of one-to-one chat. And then I'd really love Jane to come over to you, and then Angela and Chris as well. Is that all right, Jane?
Yes. So I think that it's really important to remember that we as parent carers need to prepare for the change as much as our children. And so while Chloe was having mobility and practicing her routes on the bus, we did it too, because we knew that we would be taking her and picking her up, and we knew where we were going to stand so she could find us. And I mean, we had really good transition support. So I would also recommend I know we don't know whether you can get into school, but if you possibly can, I did loads with Chloe's QBTI, her teacher of the deaf, her orientation mobility officer, a couple of days before the school opened. So the Senko was there, all the teaching staff was there, and we actually troubleshooted, which made a big difference. So Chloe knew where her locker was. She knew, you know, all these things that would have absolutely panicked her were prepared for. And actually she knew the school so well that it was great for her, because the other year sevens didn't know where to go, and she told her tutor group that she would be able to show them. So to you know, that can be achieved. And we had lots and lots of meetings. Chloe went on a residential within 3 weeks of starting the school with her one-to-ones, but she was away for 5 days from us. And that was achieved because as a team we met a lot, and the school were willing to meet us as well. So it is possible, but you need to prepare as well, because it's different, isn't it? It's that them getting their independence and us learning to let go, but being there to catch them and being able to remind the school what the EHCP says. So I will send through, I was thinking, Ruth, that I will write a blog about, I'm ready now to write a blog about what's happened to Chloe and all the successes, but the things I wish I knew at the time. So I'm happy to do that and share it.
Jane, yeah, you're a massive help, thank you. And Jane is also running parent support sessions on Fridays as well. So if you want more time to just have that parent-to-parent contact in these really weird times, then Jane is just championing those needs. Thank you, Jane. It's amazing having you. Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And Jane's also, we're running a really similar event for professionals as well. We wanted tonight to be a time for parents to get together, but we are going to be running, I say we, it's with the support of you, running a professional session that Jane will be speaking at as well from her and Chloe's point of view. Thank you. And I also, Angela, and then Chris. Is that okay if we come to you next, Angela, please?
Yes, yeah. I mean, everything that's already been said, I think, is absolutely wonderful. Definitely communicate. You know, we've all been on Zoom this evening, so if you can arrange a Zoom meeting between your new school, your existing school, parents, and include the child, you know, that would be lovely. The sensory support team are there to help support you. Habilitation specialists. There will be some variation depending on where people are living, obviously, around the UK. In England, it looks as though we will be doing some transition work, route familiarisation in schools. Habilitation VI UK have written our risk assessment guidance for all the habilitation specialists around the UK. So they will be using that and integrating it into their own area, their own sensory teams, risk assessment, and because there are specific strategies on there to help support the work as much as we can to make your child's transition as smooth as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really, really helpful, Angela. And then Chris, have you got any closing remarks for the parents for tonight?
Yeah, I'd just like to read two. So my first one would be to make sure that your child knows what the technology is out there, because I found that I was more reluctant when I first went to secondary school to try anything, because I just thought it was something very different and I didn't want to start anything new. But then once I sort of had my realization that I needed support when I was in year 10, that's when I started using an iPad, and it really opened my eyes and I became much more comfortable working. I didn't feel as stressed, and in fact other students found it more interesting, and they didn't think it was weird or different. They're more like, oh, so what's that thing? Oh, it's a magnifier. Oh, okay. But there wasn't that feeling of difference. And my second one would be, although your child may say that they don't want support and you keep pushing for it and they keep saying not to, you please do, because when they look back at that time, they may not know what you've done, but they'll be very grateful and thankful, because I was like this. I didn't want any support from my parents or my QTBI or Senko. I didn't want any of this. But once I knew that what they were doing and why, looking back, I was very grateful that they were always there for me, even though I didn't accept the support. The support was always there, waiting until I was ready to accept it.
That's really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I will. There's loads more to this, but a lot of the young people involved with Look also, and mentors, all swear by the piece of advice that you don't always have to have your TA with you at your side, and that is a really important message for young people to know, that they can say when they want their TA, maybe say, actually, I'm all right at the moment, I'm going to sit with my friends. So, and there's ways that they can communicate that subtly without having to announce it to the whole class. But that's kind of like a side point, because tonight has covered so many questions, and I know that potentially you've still got lots more. So do please get in touch with us following this event, and we'll do our best to answer any others. There is the peer mentoring service, so that our peer mentors can support children facing the moving on time and other times as well. So the mentors have all been through that journey in different places and at different kinds of schools, and that you guys, you're already like taking steps on this journey, because you're here asking the questions and networking with other parents, and I think that is just a massive support for you all in this, that you have a community and lean on it, because that's what this community is here for. So thank you all so much for coming. Ellen, is there anything else I need to say at the end of this event that I've now completely forgotten?
No, I think you've done a great job. Yeah, thank you all for joining. If you did want to continue with any sort of support, like Ruth has mentioned already, we've got the peer mentoring project for young people, and we've already mentioned Jane's parent support groups that are taking place every other Friday. Sorry, so the next one of those is this Friday, so you could carry on the conversation if you wanted. And we've got all sorts of different other different events as well. So we've got online youth forums for VI young people that Chris is running, and we've got a lot of different opportunities that you can access to kind of support you and your child and your family, as well as including a free counselling service as well. So there's a lot going on, and I just kind of encourage everyone to keep an eye on what we've got going on, because we're always trying to add more, add more to what we offer to support families. So thank you for joining. I know we've gone quite a bit over time, but it seemed like a really valuable conversation. So I'm glad to thank you to everyone who stuck with us as well.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Been
Hopefully
lovely
see some of you on Friday.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.